Okay.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I really appreciate it. I know there have been a lot of conversations going on recently, and I want to thank in particular Bob and Marie for work that they've been doing on finance pieces with Paul and Paul as well for pulling things together to sort of update where we are in the bigger picture of things and how we things we need to think about as we move forward. I had sent out a very, very brief little draft agenda. So if people have thoughts on that, let us know. I was thinking we would sort of have a quick conversation about construction finances, timing, what happens when, and how we pay for things as we move forward, and how that relates to finances in whole, which I believe has been a topic of conversation for the finance committee. And then have a little update on current projects that are ongoing. Brief update on potential future projects. And then a quick conversation about a thought I have, a proposal for a policy that maybe the board wants to consider regarding hazardous materials and the library in general. Does that sound okay? Okay. So I understand the in these times here with COVID and isolation and social distancing and being closed has had a large impact on our community and potential concerns with revenues coming in from taxes and how we need to be prudent planning as we move forward so there's been a lot of conversation with the finance committee about funds in general for the entire library organization and how we want to plan for moving forward with finance for the organization as a whole and how that affects the building committee as well and building projects. Bob, do you want to give us a little summary in terms of what any conclusions or observations or thoughts about that vis-a-vis the construction activities?
I'm sorry. What's that?
I'm sorry. I was wondering if Bob or could give us an update on the conversation that happened, what the board's feelings were about finances and the construction projects.
Well, Marie had brought the issues at the Special Finance Committee. I'm trying to let me pull it up.
And I've got a spreadsheet here.
In summary, what we've done was reversed, I think, the what had been projected as the order of which goes first, and the two projects that we talked about. With the SAM funding for the Main East Wall project. And Marie had done a lot of contact with McDonald. Marie, would you like to just summarize what you had said at the finance meeting about the two projects?
Well, I think that Paul has gotten updated information on that.
Okay. So before we dive into specifics of the grants for the finance for the construction projects, were there any thoughts in general about finances for the library and whether we need to make any changes in terms of the overall expenditures for capital work going on in terms of big picture? Do you anticipate any need to make changes from the overall scope that had previously been, not necessarily timing, but an overall scope? I think that I heard that the finance committee was feeling that we do not need to make changes in the big picture. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, Kirsten, I could review what I pointed out in my director's report in that we currently can go forward with the masonry projects, both of them. But we may have some difficulty with, going forward with the other projects because we may need to fall back on the construction fund, the undesignated construction fund, and use that as a fund that we can continue operations with for over a temporary period of time. And that would be, leaving $84,000 in that fund for emergencies. But I think we can go forward with the masonry projects. We do have about 204,000 in the undesignated construction account now.
And so I heard a couple things there. I want to make sure I understood that correctly. I think you were saying that, and I'm not sure if you're speaking for the administration, or if you're speaking for the board conversations that were had with the entire finance committee. So I'm going to try and dissect that a little bit. I think you said that the wall projects, you feel that they can proceed, that the other projects, which are under a undesignated construction account, you're proposing that we hold off on those projects potentially so that those funds could be then reallocated for operating expenses. Is that what I think I heard?
Yeah, if we need to, on a temporary basis. The problem is, of course, we don't know yet the results of the second property tax collection. But I think, it would be wise to have that fund balance that could be used in case we really need it. I have, done some budget revisions, and I think, we're in pretty good shape to cut back. But I still say that we should probably have that 84,000 in reserve. But like I said, that still means that we should go ahead with the masonry projects and get those done because.
I'm sorry, you mentioned 84,000. I'm not sure what 84,000.
Construction grant is 1 year from now, and we only have 2 years for the other grant, the SAM grant.
So a couple different pieces that I want to tease out a little bit here. My understanding is that the undesignated construction fund is 204,966.
Right.
So you mentioned 84,000. Not sure where that plays in.
Well, it's 204,000 in undesignated construction. We need about 120,000 for the north wall and the east wall as matching funds.
For our share.
That leaves, the 84,000 after those two projects. We haven't got bid results yet on that project, so we don't know exactly where we stand yet, but.
I understand. So these are your comments, and so what is the finance committee, and Marie, what is that consistent with your understanding of the finance committee, or is this a change since the finance committee met?
I don't think it's inconsistent. I mean, I think those are the projects that had been questioned at one point in time as to whether we should pursue those. I think from what I've heard that there's been general agreement that yes, we should.
We should
go ahead with them. That time is maybe of the essence. And as far as the others, they're not particularly urgent. So even if there is disagreement about that, we have time to discuss it and come to resolution. But I think that today we should try and look at what we have to do to move ahead with the two masonry projects. There seems to be a lot of need for some clarity around how to proceed on those.
Agreed. And we'll get to that when we talk about the current projects portion of this here. So well, I understand you're saying that the board is the finance committee group is generally in support of this approach to stick with the designated construction account monies for the north wall and east wall project, and to consider the balance of the designated construction account as well as the full balance of the undesignated construction account to hold in reserve in case it's needed for operating expenses.
I don't, that what you said secondly, I don't know that there's been agreement on that, but as far as I know, and anyone's welcome to jump in and disagree, we haven't actually had a vote on it, but what I've been hearing from people is we can't afford not to proceed with the two projects that are, or the deadline is approaching.
And before any funds are withdrawn from the undesignated construction account, there'll be further discussion in the future to confirm that that's the direction that the board wants to go.
With the other projects.
Or with operating expenses.
Right. I mean, but it's the other projects that would affect the
Yes.
the money left for other uses than matching for the grant.
So in any case, before any monies are taken out of either of those accounts beyond the east and north wall, there'll be further discussion at the board level. Is that correct?
I believe that if there's still disagreement on that, there needs to be, and that's probably a more appropriate discussion for the finance committee.
Okay. I just wanted to understand if there was already green light for funds to be withdrawn from that or not. So it sounds like there's not a green light at this time for funds to be withdrawn without further discussion.
Beyond the east and the north wall projects.
Got it. Good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for being so persnickety about it. I just didn't quite understand. Evelyn, does you have a question?
That's okay. Because again, you know, that discussion kept going around and around. And I think the caveat is if we will lose, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if we will not be able then to finish these projects ever, and if there is no extension, then that money needs to be used for those two projects. But since we are at an immediacy of issues of cash, then if we have those other ifs taken care of, then we might look at using that money to keep us open and keep our staff whole.
Which money are you referring to? I just.
The money in the undesignated, unrestricted monies in there.
So the 204,000,
Right, because I think
or what remains after the two, the north and east wall.
My understanding is it's 205,000 almost.
well, I think it's that
undesignated,
constant balancing act.
and 187.5 in the designated. But they're both within a construction.
I was just trying to clarify with Evelyn whether she's referring to the whole 204,000 or she's referring to the balance after the money from the undesignated account that would be needed for the north and east wall.
I think that you look at the entirety and then what's left, and if that would be enough to tide us over. If not, then we have to kind of rebalance and go back and say, do we have to do these projects? I know Paul did some more follow-ups. I know you said something about Tim's interpretation, if I believe. I don't know if you were able to talk to Dasney about extensions for projects that haven't been started. I think that was the caveat that you mentioned in your email. But, you know, again, what's our primary goal? Is that to keep the library open and keep our staff intact? Or to go ahead with certain projects? And again, I don't want to lose that money that we have in grants. I do not want to lose that money, and I don't want the building falling down. However, I also don't want us to, like Marie keeps saying, close, or I don't want us to lose staff, because guess what? We're going to have a real problem and other expenses, you know, for those who look at it pragmatically in the long run if we do that.
Well, there's losing staff, and then there's reducing staff time, which aren't necessarily the same thing.
And you need to look at that. I think that it might exactly be the same thing.
I think that I want to hear
I
that
think
from the.
Paul has already implied in our last meeting that it has already happened. So when we start talking about reducing time and reducing this, things snowball. People make decisions. So
As we all do, yes. So I think I want to hear that. I would like to see a study that shows that what has been explored in terms of hours, if that's something. You know, I think we talked about either we're doing the north wall and the east wall, or we're not doing it. To say we're going to wait until maybe sometime, either we need to proceed or we can't. We can't wait, and if we need a decision needs to be made so we can move forward.
Yeah,
well, yes, I was looking.
I think
I
that
was looking. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
be able to set the stage a little here. The masonry project is out to bid. We also have, in addition, the bids will be back, but at the same time, we have the complete hazardous materials report, and there are indeed asbestos issues that have to be abated. So we have to quickly get a design done and the abatement done, particularly on the parapet wall area. So it's asbestos that can't be avoided in this project. We have 1 year from basically today to complete that project.
And I'm sorry, are we saying north wall or east wall?
What's that?
Are we saying north wall or east
The
wall?
north wall, which is the big part. That's the big part.
North is
We have basically 1 year to complete that. We're working in a sort of an unknown construction environment right now. We're not exactly sure what we're going to see in the bid. We're not exactly sure what we're going to see in terms of timeliness. We're going to have to, you know, really go full blast to get this thing done in time, because it's a masonry project, and as you know, there's certain months of the year we won't be able to do this. So we have to begin hopefully in the fall, and maybe we can get it done.
So Paul, if we do the north wall first, will we then have the cash needed to do the east wall?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
From what?
I mean, yeah, we will still have, let's see, what did I say originally? 113,000 in that fund. Again, the reason here is that the SAM grant through DASNY is a reimbursal situation. But I don't see that as a big problem if it's played right. DASNY is open for some negotiation on that if it's really necessary. but I really don't think it will be. I think the reimbursement situation will work fine.
So
I'm-
there had been a recommendation from the board to look at doing the east wall first and then use the reimbursal from DASNY from the east wall in order to do the north wall with less impact, financial impact. So it sounds like you'd rather not do that. You'd rather do it with a different, you'd rather do it in the reverse order. And you think that the cash flow won't be impacted and that both projects will be possible to do.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, as long as, you know, the tax collection's not a disaster, you know, I don't think that the reimbursement procedure will be a problem.
Paul,
It wouldn't be the first time we had to do that.
Paul, have
Yeah.
you gotten definitive word that there will be no extensions on either of these two projects? And not just interpretations, not just maybes, but
No,
definitive.
I understand the question. As far as the public library construction grant is,
Mhm.
I would not look for any extensions there. The public library construction grant is governed by law. So that when they gave an extension this year, and I didn't realize it was only for projects that were in their third year and couldn't complete, when they gave that extension, they actually had to modify the law to do that.
Okay,
So I don't, unless there's another huge disaster next spring, I don't see another extension with the public library construction grant.
okay,
Is in DASNY, that's not the case. It's their policy and it's written in our contract, which, you know, the date that the contract was finalized was May 2019. And so, you know, it's a 3-year project from that date. That's the finalized contract date.
I'm sorry, that's
You know,
That's the-
from now to get that project done.
okay.
DASNY can extend that.
All right.
If you apply and they feel like you need that and they're in a good mood, yeah. No, seriously.
No, I had to
Um,
laugh.
You
You
know, they have the ability to change that and to give you an extension.
Okay,
It's a much different story with the public library construction grant. That's written in law. They have to go through the legislature, and that's always a big problem.
the clarity of that was, I did not see that or read that clearly for me in your messages. So now I see there's, got it.
So I apologize. I heard a date there in the middle. I want to make sure I heard that date correctly. You're saying that the SAM grant completion deadline is 5/15/21, is that correct?
Right. Or yes,
22.
it's 15. I thought maybe it was 19.
Did you
Anyway,
say 3 years?
it's mid-May and 21.
22?
Is it 21 or 22?
I'm going 3 years is 22, isn't it? My math skills,
Yeah,
well,
22, I'm sorry.
yeah, 22. Wow, my
2
math
years
skills.
from now.
So we're saying that the East Wall SAM grant deadline is 5/15/22.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
And actually, that deadline is written into the contract. It's in.
okay.
So,
So you actually reviewed our contract, Paul? It's
Yeah.
right now it's sort of gotten two different ruling or
I spent several days actually reviewing everything regarding the SAM grant, which is page upon page of stuff. But you know, with this situation now, I felt that it was important to get back to that thing and make sure it was what it was. But yes, it's written out in the contract when the last day that they can accept invoices to be reimbursed.
So that you have to have spent the money and be able to say that this is,
Yeah.
that's it. After that, you can't get reimbursed for any monies that are spent after that, so.
Right, which means, you know, you gotta not only you gotta get the project done, and you gotta get the invoices and the contractor to give you those invoices and get all that and, you know, copy
And cut a check.
and fill out the forms and that sort of thing. So, you know, you can't wait till May 15th to do that.
Right. So similarly, then on the library construction project, the north wall, the courtyard side, the completion date for that is 6/30/21. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
So we have $204,000 in the undesignated construction account now.
200.
If we pay our share of the north wall, that would leave about 90,000. Am I correct?
I'm sorry,
yeah, that's, wait a minute.
Cool.
Um, and that's our share.
Right, so we'd have to lay that out. Assuming, now this assumes, right, that that's what it will cost. We don't really know
Mm-hmm.
Well, we
how much
don't,
it might cost.
until we see the bids, but in the case of them being much different, we have to redesign the project a little. I just don't know where all the contractors stand right now.
you're very busy.
So,
That's what I'm hearing.
so that would leave 90,000. The amount that we have to lay out at most for the SAM would be 125,000. And also we're talking about possibly using,
Well, wait.
Why?
The SAM grant in the statement of work, our estimate for that was 132,000.
Yeah.
The SAM grant
Okay.
is 125,000. So there's a $7,000 contribution that we agreed to make.
okay, so it's even more. So it's 132,000.
Right.
And after the paying for the north wall, we would only have what's expected to be 90,000 left.
91,000 actually, I think.
Right, well, so how will we be able to afford to do the SAM project?
I have another question, Paul. If,
Well-
you know, we go through the process, are all those bills for the back wall, they won't come in at the same time, right?
What's this?
The back wall, the one that we have to lay out the cash and then get reimbursed.
Yeah.
All those bills don't come in at the same time, is that correct? Am I right?
No, I mean, we asked the contractor to bill us when a certain amount of work is done. We can't submit more than one a month. That project may not take more than a month or two. So we might expect, I don't know, we have to figure out with the contractor how those invoices are gonna come in.
Because, you know, to answer that question about how much we have to lay out and the fact that we only have 91,000 and we need 132, but if there's some roll of what we pay and then what we get reimbursed for, maybe that, you know, if we get reimbursed for X dollars, we can use that to pay off the next bill. Even though I know that reimbursement will be slow. But thanks, I need you to visualize that.
Sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
well, at least you know it's your money. I mean, it's,
What I think we can do, and which I have done before, we have used our regular operating funds as a backup just in case. So going forward, I mean, we usually carry a pretty substantial balance. I think it would work just fine to use those funds. And again, if we do the north wall first, this would put us into next year.
So I have to say, I'm completely confused. I don't understand. We've got undesignated construction account. We have a designated construction account. I don't understand if those are two separate things or if they are, one is a subset of the other. That's the first thing I'm confused about. The second thing I'm confused about is these two different conversations about cash flow and doing the one wall first or doing the second wall first. I thought I had an understanding of how that worked, but this conversation has completely confused me on this here. Maybe other people understand it better than me. I'm not a finance person. But I would, what would be helpful to me would be a cash flow projection. We've got this much money. We're going to spend this much per month. Our balance goes down as we spend money. We get reimbursed at this time, and how that reimbursement plays in with the expenditures. And do we ever dip down below zero, or do we stay above zero the entire time? So I'm confused. Bob and Marie have much more experience in finance than I do. Maybe, do you guys understand this? Let me ask that.
Yeah, if I could, I just wanted to weigh in a little. Paul, I thought your conversation at the conclusion of our discussion about the construction grants with Mark in particular, I thought our thinking was that we needed to do the east wall first because that reimbursement was fairly certain and rather rapid, and the lesser amount laid out, we wouldn't get caught. If we did the north wall first, and then we had a crunch on the revenue tax, we might be in a bind as to meeting expenses, where if we did the east wall first, we wouldn't be in the situation where it would impact operations because the money would flow in a clearer way. I think if we take the larger project first and then we get stuck with a financial crunch, not on the construction side, but on the operational side, what Mark was afraid of is that we would be not have enough money to meet payroll. So I thought that was pretty, I thought it was a consensus, or everybody was lined up to do it that way. So if we now flip it, I think there is some danger that we might impact the operational needs with finance.
Well, there was a change since that meeting. Marie had said that the SAM grant was due, we only had the 2 years, so that we had both grants we had to do in 1 year.
Right.
But we don't actually need to do that. We do need to do the north wall in 1 year, but we have 2 years now to do the SAM grant on the east wall.
Okay.
So it makes sense to kind of switch that a little bit and do the north wall first and then do the east wall second.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Kirsten, I think, you know, what you're saying about the projections of the use of cash makes sense, but we don't have that kind of certainty that you're describing. We don't know, you know, like, although we're talking about doing these projects, Paul is also talking about using the undesignated construction fund for shortfalls of some kind.
And that's what I'm trying to understand. You know, what is the available balance to address those? You know, someone's mentioned something about $90,000, and I don't know, I'm confused. And so I don't understand, is that a maximum that's available, or is that a maximum available during a certain period of time during that process? Does that amount change? So I was a little confused. But maybe you can help me out with the very basic question. I see the spreadsheet, we list that there is 204,966 in an undesignated construction account. I also see that there's a $187,551 in a designated construction account. Are those two separate quantities for a total value of $391,000?
Yeah,
Or is this here a subset of this?
yeah, Kirsten, what happens is the Public Library Construction Grant, which is the North Wall, is prepaid. 90% of it is prepaid. That 187,000 is in an account, but it is for that project, not
Yes.
anything else.
Right, so that is one quantity of money.
Right, that's one pot of money. The second pot of money is what we call the undesignated construction account. And it's collected, but it's not earmarked towards a particular project.
But is that, and is that designated amount within that undesignated amount, or is it separate?
No, they're two separate accounts. So
Okay,
monthly in the board meetings, we get the accounts, the investment account, the payroll account, and the operating account, and then we get what's called the construction account, which is the undesignated construction, and then we get the figures for the designated construction. So there are
completely separate pot of money.
five different pots of cash that is reported on each board meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I appreciate it.
I think also going forward, I don't believe we can go forward in this particular time with no risk whatsoever. There may be some risk. On the DASNY grant, it does state that if the organization has some issues and difficulty, that they would consider prepaying that grant. That's something, though, that's not guaranteed, and they would have to make that decision. You know, we're going to confuse the issue a little more because we have to establish another construction account, because DASNY insists that you have that you separate the money and put it in a totally separate account. But I think, you know, all in all, we probably need to go ahead and with these projects, or we'll lose the money.
Well, and Paul has experience with the library construction grants, but we don't have any prior experience with the SAM, with the DASNY, with the requirements and how that functions.
I have done a reimbursement type grant before, and the roof that's currently on the main library was a reimbursement style grant.
And was that through DASNY, or was that?
No, that was back before the current program. I forgot what it's called. It was a SHPO grant that came to us years ago through, you know, but that was a totally reimbursable grant. So the contractors had to submit, and then we'd submit invoices, and then they'd be repaid. But we did that based on our operating funds.
So it sounds like, Paul, you'd like to move ahead with the North Wall project. It's currently out to bid. When do you anticipate bids will be received?
Sorry?
When do you anticipate receiving bids?
I believe next week.
beginning of the week, end of the week? When do you anticipate being able to report out what the bids are?
Yeah, I will as soon as I know.
Oh, isn't there wouldn't there be a deadline?
Yeah, it should be. I thought it was Wednesday, but I'll have to double check.
Okay. Okay.
So regarding that project, now is there asbestos associated with with the east wall as well? Do we anticipate?
I think the main project on the east wall is the capstones. Replacing the capstones, removing them and resealing them. That's a kind of a big project in that east wall. I don't believe there's asbestos in that area. The most asbestos that we ran across was in the parapet walls.
And the capstones, were they tested?
I'm sorry?
Was the east wall tested?
Yes, everything was tested. Oh yeah, everything that was in both those grants was tested.
So will the asbestos abatement that's necessary hold up the north wall project?
No, no, I think there's a goodly amount of work that can be done even while they're doing the abatement.
Will the same people do the abatement as the masonry?
No. No, that's totally different.
So, and what you were
was-
saying about, if the project cost is different than what we had projected, then the project gets revised. So we didn't account for the asbestos, right? And the cost of
Right.
doing that.
Right, no, that's true. That's why hopefully the bids come in lower than I expected or that were originally estimated. Estimate, I think, was fairly high originally.
Because I would have expected, since that occurred a couple years ago, that it would have gone up now, but perhaps things have gone up and then back down again.
It depends on the what the contractors are doing out there and whether they're hungry or, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
From what I'm hearing,
Material cost here. A lot of it is labor cost.
from what I'm hearing, the contractors are very, very busy now, and
Yeah.
I'm not expecting low bids.
Yeah, well, we can see what happens. I mean, that's all we can do at this point.
And actually, Mark said the opposite. He was hearing that things that folks were looking for jobs, for work to do.
Well,
But
again,
it could,
comes in significantly higher, we could cut out the parapet project altogether. The north wall is the wall that right now has some netting on it because we had falling bricks. So it's kind of a high priority.
Yep.
The parapet walls are in pretty bad shape, but the bricks don't fall on people.
Yeah.
So
So
far, right?
we could cut that parapet wall project out, and go from there.
And that would also omit the asbestos piece as well?
It would, yeah, I think it would. I'd have to double check because there's a couple of asbestos spots is that silver paint up there, which is, I thought most of it was in the parapet walls, but it might be some of it elsewhere. So we may still face some asbestos abatement, even though we take out the parapet walls from the project. I don't know if there's things we can do with the capstones at this point because those really need to be sealed on both the north and the east wall. So we'll see.
so in making the decision to go ahead with the north wall, you're also pursuing the asbestos abatement at the same time?
Yeah, we're right. There's actually two parts to the asbestos. It's the design phase and then the abatement phase. Hopefully, right now I'm looking for a company that does both. But we'll see what happens with that. But generally, my original idea was to fold that in, so the contractor would just simply subcontract the asbestos abatement, but it doesn't really work very well that way.
None of it's currently out to bid. If we weren't out to bid yet, that might be something we could consider. But if you're expecting to receive bids in 3 days, it's too late to add that into that project in that way.
Yeah, I guess, like everything else, it's a bit unsure until you see the bids.
Do you have a timeline for when you'll have somebody lined up for doing the asbestos design and bid that work?
Yeah, hopefully I'm working on that next week. I got, right now, like I said, we're looking for the design and the abatement at the same time. I think that'll be cheaper going that way. But yeah, next week I'm trying to get that done because, as I said, this is, the timing here is kind of critical. Basically because it's all masonry and its weather is heavily involved.
So you anticipate that being done this calendar year?
Yeah. Actually, I think, we bid this project as one project. We have to separate the paperwork on it, and the contractor has to be aware that that's going to be the case. But if we do this thing right, we should have both projects done this year by the June deadline.
So not by this calendar year.
Well, it would be 2021. I think I'd love to get it done in 2020. I mean, if we find a contractor who's gung-ho ready to go, get it done, yeah, that'd be great.
Well, be curious to hear what the bids come in. And I think the first question you receive after getting bids would be to ask them what their projected schedule is and whether they have manpower available to do that work and what they, if they can meet the contractually required deadlines.
Yeah, I intend to do some serious browbeating. So anyway, yes, we do need to pin down, we do need to make them aware of the timeline and the time situation.
And I assume there was no schedule that was included as part of the bid package.
What's that?
I assume there was no bid schedule as part of the bid package.
Yeah,
There was a construction schedule?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. I haven't seen it, so I'm just glad to hear that there's a construction schedule in there. That would be important to be able to get that level of commitment and contractually for the contractors. So
Yeah, I think I may need some help in how we pin that down, but exactly, wording wise.
okay. Again, it's harder to do after the bid than before the bid. So if there's something you have questions on, I'm happy to go over that with you at any time, and we can maybe get that part of the contract. Is there anything else we want to talk about on the wall projects at this time? Okay. I guess we'll find out how bids come in next week. So if you, Paul, if you could please keep us posted, that'd be very much appreciated. Any updates on the SHPO grant and any word from our friends at SHPO? No
more. I haven't heard anything more. from SHPO. I don't even know if they're back in the office yet. That's been the problem.
They're not doing any remote work. They just closed shop and aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know about the particular department that Danielle's with, but other SHPO employees seem to be doing things.
And I know the DOT is working actively on a daily basis. They're all working from home. So I'm sorely disappointed in the lack of response from SHPO, but sounds like they operate on a different timeline. If there's nothing else to talk about in terms of the current projects, shall we move on to some future projects and grants that were out there?
Yeah, well, a couple of things, actually. It's not actually a grant, but the insurance company seems to be moving towards actually covering our problem at Lansingburg. I don't know, it's like pulling teeth with them, but it seems like they're going to go ahead with covering that. They've been in contact with Roush Brothers, who did the estimates, and they wanted the breakdown. And so I'm hopeful that we can do that, because the floor really needs to be replaced over there in that corner.
That's the floor in the reading room.
That's Lansingburg.
That's Lansingburg, the reading room.
Right, there's that floor way over in the corner, part of the floor that we had redone. And also the wainscoting and that sort of thing needs to be fixed. So hopefully we can get that done. I will be filling out an application for the 2021 round of public library construction grants. Thanks to Kirsten's description, we want to take a look at replacing the floor in the staff kitchen, with poured concrete, and then doing the repairs necessary in the reading room, main reading room, where some of the drains have been damaging the walls, leaking, whatever they are doing. So I sort of planned on rolling that into one grant. Now, we would, in this particular case, qualify for the 90-10 split. Our contribution would only be 10% of the project, rather than the current 25%. The cupola, as I understand it, this is a kind of a slow process, and it winds up being approved eventually by DASNY. I understand that that's still there at DASNY, and they take a while to review all those grants. So there isn't a final approval on that grant, but usually it is no problem by the time it reaches DASNY, unless they have a couple of questions, but that's about it.
So the Lansingburg cupola project, we do not yet have a defined or accepted grant for that.
Right, we don't have a final, and nor do we have the money yet.
Got it. Okay. So so there's no completion date for that yet, because we haven't been granted it yet.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Well, we have a deadline for it though, right?
For what?
For the cupola?
No, you don't get a deadline. The deadline is 3 years from when it's finalized.
Oh, for the library construction grants, that's the
Right.
case?
Right. So it's not finalized yet.
Grant has not yet been issued formally.
Right. Well, perhaps the dates that I put in for in trying to look at the amount of cash that was needed are incorrect then, because I based it on the year that it was awarded. So Paul, maybe you and I can review that to make sure that we have accurate deadlines in there.
Sure.
And in the past, they haven't backdated their contracts, have they? You think that you think that the date that they would formally issue the contract would be the date of start? They wouldn't issue
Yeah,
it back?
basically, and it's a little confusing because technically it's supposed to be due in 2 years from that date. And the third year is an extension, which they always grant. So, we go on the basis of 3 years, but it's technically supposed to be 2 years.
But we're not even sure when that 3-year period starts.
Not yet.
But we're sure that the 3-year period will start on the date that that contract is signed.
Right.
Not that they would backdate to when the grant was awarded.
Right.
So we understand the grant was awarded in 2019, but no contract has been signed yet, so that the start date will always be 3 years from some date in the future. They're not going to go back to that 2019 date. Is what I think I hear you say.
Yeah, it's actually what you do. You get a letter, that it's from the date of that letter that they send.
So we've not yet gotten that letter.
Yeah. You don't actually sign a contract on that. It just, your application is basically the contract. So they send you a letter and say everything's approved.
Okay. So we've only heard this verbally that we got this grant. We haven't heard anything in writing yet we got this grant.
Okay, so that sounds like something that I need to do then, is to meet with Paul to get those deadlines confirmed, to make sure they're correct.
And I've been jotting a few notes on that as well. So certainly
And
I can share my
also
notes.
that I'll look at revising the table that I did that tries to look at the amount of money that would come out of the different, the undesignated construction and the construction accounts in conjunction with the different projects.
I've been finding this very helpful, so I appreciate your pulling this together. And I have a couple of small questions on it I'll ask you offline about, just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So I appreciate your pulling together that spreadsheet. And I appreciate this conversation to understand what has been formally accepted, what is pending, what is out there as a maybe, and those timelines are, of course, very important to this whole discussion. So I appreciate everyone's time and patience with me to understand this here. So I apologize for my financial obtuseness and so talking me through this here. Paul, you and I talked about the fire access key box. Is that something that we're able to get closure on with the fire department or a locksmith and get that squared away? Or is that still hanging out there?
I have to apologize. It is still hanging out there. I had to move it down in my agenda here a bit, but I think, where we discussed putting it is a great idea. I think that'll work. And so I think we should go ahead with it. I just have to make all the arrangements. I think that I think what happens is the company makes arrangements with the local fire department and they pick that up. I will move that up on my agenda a bit.
There's a lot going on there, so obviously it's
Definitely.
it's just one piece here. So I just wanted to touch base and thank you. We talked about the potential projects for the grants. You said you might lump them into one grant for the basement floor as well as the reading room plaster. Thank you. The last item I have on, just wanted to bring up for a topic of a discussion is that dealing with an old building, there's a lot of unknowns as we move forward, and it would be valuable to have records that reflect any information that has been gathered, and you know, having a set of procedures that we would have as we move forward with construction projects, specifically having to do with hazardous materials. Lead paint, I'm sure there's lead paint that's been applied at some point in this building. And as we've talked about, there's been asbestos that's been discovered. Different periods of time have different kinds of asbestos, or different amounts of asbestos. I think probably when the building was originally built, there might not have been much, but obviously repairs happen, changes happen over time, and asbestos was very prevalent in some periods. And so now we've gotten in a condition where we've been bitten by this a little bit. So I'd like to propose that we think about some sort of resolution that anytime that there are capital projects being planned for the buildings, that there be a hazardous materials investigations at the start of the project rather than at the end of the project, and that any hazardous materials records that we have be assembled in one location so that they can be used as a reference moving forward for other people and other projects in the future.
We do have some studies that were done. There was a study done for the elevator project. Now, of course, there's a study for the roof area. There was a study done of paint, which we had to remove some paint from the handicap access ramp. And there's been some work in the basement. So we had quite a bit of hazardous materials studies. So almost everywhere in the building is hazardous material.
Yeah.
So what I need to do is pull those files together. I got them all over the place. Yes, we do need to pull those together into one file. So,
And every project's different, so it wouldn't necessarily be that you're going to find the answer you're looking for at every project in this file, but it just would help, I think, as we move forward for other projects, that it would be a reference there for testing people who are coming in. Not that they have to start from scratch, but they can use this as a reference as they build their assessment of the existing conditions. So I would think it'd be very valuable to have that investigation early in the process, and it shouldn't be an administrator's responsibility to have to do all that coordination and pulling those people together. I think it really needs a matter of hiring somebody who can come in and do that as part of that design process. I think we should be directing the architect to have those investigations done early in the process so that they can include that as part of their design process, not that it comes in at the end of when we're out to bid. How does the committee feel about some sort of board policy or recommendation to the board on hazardous materials and planning for that as we move forward with other projects?
I would be willing to follow your recommendation, Kirsten.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know with the state, we have our whole hazardous material handling online training that we have to do every year, even though the most hazardous material I handle is toner cartridges. But it's very clear you know, there are a lot of, the policies and procedures are very well thought out and easy to find, and, you know, it's all there.
It sounds like even more involved for day-to-day use as opposed to construction, demolition, and building
Right.
pieces. You're actually talking about
Right.
cleaning materials and toner.
Everything. But anything you could possibly run into working at the state in any building, which encompasses a lot.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yes, Evelyn.
Kirsten, this is just a question, I swear, because I'm not an architect.
Yeah, no,
Nor
please
do I
ask.
play on TV. So, is it ever advantageous to have that done further on in the project than at the beginning of the project?
You don't want to do it before you know the scope of the project.
Okay.
But once you know the scope of the project, I would recommend having that done so that it can be included in the design of the project. So if you're going to say, I'm doing some work in the reading room, well, then you probably should understand what's happening in the reading room. Doesn't mean you have to do the entire building necessarily. But if you're saying, hey, I'm going to run wires through the entire building,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you might, who knows where you run into.
Okay. So
materials.
there's never any advantage for whatever reason in doing it later on. It seems to me that it's something that you really ought to be doing at the beginning. So you
Right.
know what the pitfalls are before you
It
jump
may
in
even
that.
allow you to design around those pitfalls if you
Okay.
know what those pitfalls are.
Okay. Thank you for that. So
So
I think the basic questions here are also the other part of the question is, should this be a policy from the board instead of just a way of doing things? And I don't know, I think it may be better to have these things in writing so people know that we have been thinking about it, that we've put it together, and that, you know, we have a document and a way of doing things. I probably didn't say that well at all. I'm
no,
sorry.
I think you have. I'll put together a little bit of language on it. I mean, certainly don't want to, you know, be micromanaging these things here, but I think it's just sort of setting a baseline for the organization as a practice to move forward with.
So it'll say it'll talk about when the hazardous material review might be done and what happens to those reports, in other words, in keeping them together for access if necessary, right? Am I getting that correctly?
I think in broad brushstrokes, yes, I think that is,
Okay.
that was my thought on it. Is others comfortable with that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll put together some draft language, I'll share it out, and I welcome any input from anybody.
Yeah. Paul, are you also comfortable with this idea?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's something you deal with all the time in our, you know, any kind of project that comes up, that's the first thing you deal with. And like I said, we've got a number of studies that were done. Yeah, it'd be nice to get ahead of that.
And it, you know, again, it's good to have it articulated at the board level too.
Yeah, I mean, my knowledge here is limited to asbestos and lead paint. This is what we deal with all the time. If there's other things out there that are going to get us, I would like to know that.
Well, I think federal law now keeps us safe from most of the really toxic cleaning materials, but you still might see some of that out there. But I think
I have to just to add some humor, like toxic hand sanitizer.
don't drink it.
Hopefully we don't have any that's
Some
toxic.
of these you shouldn't put on your hands, and you know the FDA has just pulled some of these. They're on a recall list.
Well, and I think there was some concern with the North Wall project that having to do asbestos abatement might delay the project when we already were contending with a very tight deadline. So it's good that we're able to proceed But yeah, it would be better to be on top of it rather than trying to deal with it under pressure.
The complication we face now is that it sounds like we'd have two separate contracts. We have a mason working over here, we have an asbestos person working over here, and now coordination of those two efforts falls on the administration to coordinate timing and access. And if we could do it all as one contract that has a subcontractor who does asbestos, a subcontractor who does the masonry, that would make your life easier.
Yeah, this is not going to be a surprise to the contractor. We have to share the study from Ambien with the contractor, where the asbestos is and how much. And so they will know, the whole story going forward.
Yep. But then you're not done yet. You'll have to deal with coordination and timing. One guy wants to work on Sunday, the other guy wants to work on Sunday also. But Sunday's a bad choice. Monday, they both want to work on Monday in the same area, and who gets to go first, and that can be a little bit of a headache. So I hope it goes smoothly and well. Sometimes if it's not, if a contractor is dealing with both of them, then you don't have to deal with the headache. But I hope it goes smoothly and well. Okay. Does anyone else have anything you want to bring forward for today's conversation?
If we have nothing further that's pertinent to the building committee, I just wondered whether Paul might give us an update on the public opening and how that went. Are people interested in hearing about that?
What?
I was wondering if you could just give us a brief update on how the public opening went.
The public opening, yes. Actually, well, it went well. And the curbside, there are still people who would prefer the curbside, even though they can come in the building. So we've got, both those services going on. Sometimes that's a little hectic because, you got circulation on the phone and then somebody comes up to the desk and wants service, but it's going smoothly, and we're getting a lot of people in, and circulation is halfway decent. Not as it would be normally, but it's the word is out that we are open for limited service.
Right?
If people want to come to the library, that's great.
Hopefully, again, it depends, the scheduling, how we do this. Hopefully, we'll be able to. We're looking at Lansingburg on July 9th as an opening. Hopefully that will work. We've been moving a few things around up there so that, again, we have the space, for social distancing and so on. I think I'm going to wind up having to make the sneeze guards up there. It's really hard to buy what really works. So anyway, that's something I can do this weekend,
Thank you for making those custom pieces there. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Do we have will they go to the A/B system, team system too? And do we have enough staff to have
Well,
an A/B system here and there?
that's what I've been debating amongst myself. Right now, it seems possible, the schedule that Dale has come up with. It looks like we can do that. But again, it depends on what happens here at the main library. If somebody contracts the virus and is part of a particular team, that kind of knocks that team out for a while. So we don't know if that's going to happen. But yeah, right now it looks like we're going to have two teams. The plan is pretty limited hours at Lansingburg. It's like 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. So it's pretty limited, but at least it gives people the opportunity to, get the books and pick up their reserves and that sort of thing.
So would you end up with 3 teams then, an A, B, and a C team, A and B working at the main branch and C team working at the Lansingburg branch?
Right now, they will be separate, at least based on our schedule. So we're able to do both. we think.
So A, B, and C and D.
Yeah, that, right. Yeah, basically that's what that is. You know, the date is again tentative. It depends on, you know, whether everything works. And that's why we won't advertise that until the day or the day before.
Are you getting feedback from staff, how they feel about working in the setup as it currently exists? Are they comfortable, or any concerns that they're raising?
Oh, there is some concern. And, you know, we're going along with that. So far, you know, people are willing to come in and do the work. So, yeah, so far so good.
Well, thank you for the update. Is there anything that you need from the committee? I'm sorry, that question was directed to Paul.
What's that?
Is there anything you need from us?
Oh, no, I think we're good. I think I have my marching orders pretty well. I'll keep everybody in the loop though on, you know, this masonry project. It's going to be, you know, there's some unknowns.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your time and getting together today. Really appreciate it. Look, if anyone has any questions or concerns, please let me know. I will send out a draft to everybody for your consideration of some language about hazardous materials and for consideration for the entire board. And I would appreciate your feedback on any draft that we put together, okay?
Okay.
Well, I wish everybody a good weekend.
You
You
too.
too.
Thank you very much.
Alrighty. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.